I think it's absolutely insane that Israel is still publicly claiming, they have the audacity to say this at the United Nations, that they're fighting against Hamas. They bombed everything but Hamas inside of Gaza. They bombed hospitals, schools, United Nations facilities, Red Crescent facilities, mosques, churches, civilian homes, evacuee convoys. They're literally bombing everything but Hamas inside of Gaza. And that's because their real effort is to force the Palestinian people out of Gaza and take over that land once and for all. They don't want a Palestinian state, as many nations across the world have called on to create, establishing the United Nations Security Council resolution to establish a Palestinian state. And the reason why they're doing all of this is because they know they can't defeat Hamas. That's why they haven't gone in to Gaza. They know that if they will, they'll probably have a response from many Arab states and maybe Iran as well. And they know that in a war of that magnitude, they wouldn't win.
Yeah, Justin, a lot of media reports are talking about how this, or Israel itself even, how this is an unprovoked attack by Hamas. As if this is brand new. This started on October the 7th. Before that, nothing had ever happened. There were no tensions in the region. But is that really the case? Is that how it's reported in the United States?
It is how it's reported in the United States, but as an American citizen and American patriot who's very upset with the fact that so many millions of our taxpayer dollars, billions of our taxpayer dollars every year are sent over to Israel to fund the continued occupation of Palestinian land, I know that this conflict didn't start on October 7th. Anyone who's saying this conflict started on October 7th is historically illiterate and sounds just as insane as those who said that the conflict between Ukraine and Russia started on February 24th of 2022. We all know that Ukraine was slaughtering people in the Donbass long before that very date. Same with the people of Palestine. They've been tortured, killed, imprisoned, and forcibly removed from their land for decades upon decades. And for everyone who's so upset about a few Hamas rockets that found its way into Israel and passed through the Iron Dome, they say that these Hamas rockets are the most evil rockets on the face of the earth, but they act like Israeli rockets are somehow any better when these Israeli rockets are landing again on civilians left and right, thousands upon thousands killed. 44% of the civilian population in Gaza is under the age of 14 years old. It's very clear that Israel's a terrorist state, and as much as they try to post on social media and claim that Hamas is somehow aligned with ISIS or comparable to ISIS, even though they're mortal enemies, the truth of the matter is Israel and its actions today is far more of a force that resembles the tactics of ISIS in targeting civilians wherever they see best fit.
Yeah, it's interesting indeed. You mentioned there a second ago about the billions of US dollars making their way to Israel. Now, the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, you may remember, she said that the US can afford to fund two wars, both Ukraine and now Israel. But really, can it? I mean, some politicians say Washington should focus its efforts probably at the problems at home. What are your thoughts?
I 100% agree. I think that we should defund Ukraine and defund Israel. Why is it that any of our taxpayer dollars are going to nations like this, or any nation at all, but most importantly, nations that are committing such horrific war crimes on a daily basis, when we have a crisis at the U.S. border, we have 500 to 600,000 homeless Americans on our streets every night, 60,000 of which are homeless veterans? It makes no sense to me that we're doing this, and Joe Biden just sent about 900 U.S. Marines over to Israel. They just landed moments ago in the country. I think we're about to see a very big war. And it's a war that is allegedly, reportedly being fought against a terrorist group, as the U.S. labels Hamas. But at the end of the day, the U.S., Brussels, the United Kingdom are really the only countries in the world that label Hamas as a terrorist group. Most of the world doesn't label Hamas as a terrorist group. And I also think it's funny that the United States, who's responsible for millions of civilian deaths all across the world, notably in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, so on and so forth, has the audacity to call anyone else a terrorist group.
Yeah, we'll see how. Let's hope it doesn't escalate, Jackson. But before I let you go, we've seen over the last sort of few days protests all over the world, really. We saw the protests held by Jewish people when they sort of like visited, I don't want to say stormed, that's the wrong word, but they visited the US Capitol and they sort of protest against Israel's government, or the current policies, if you want, in Gaza. Do you think the movement, the human movement of protesting around the world, will this change anything? Does it really matter what the people think?
Well, I think we're in the middle of an information war, just as we all were in the early days of the Ukraine war. And we know that information is a powerful tool because when the public turns against whatever the official narrative is being pushed by the United States, Brussels, or the United Kingdom, that's when things begin to come to a close. And by that, I mean, You look at the Ukraine situation, Ukraine is getting far less Western support than ever before because for the first time since the war broke out, the majority of Americans now oppose sending more aid to Ukraine. So I think right now we're seeing a very, very broad consensus of individuals all across Western states and non-Western states who say that they oppose what Israel's doing and they stand with Palestine. You see leftists, conservatives, libertarians. I myself am a communist and I stand with Palestine and I love my country and I want our country to focus on our own issues. You know, again, I mentioned the crisis at our border. Why are we sending any military personnel to Israel when, you know, they're going to be focused on protecting Israeli borders when we need to focus on protecting our own borders here?
All right, then we'll have to leave it there. Jackson Hinkle, thanks a lot for joining me today here on RT, political analyst and host of The Dive with Jackson Hinkle.
You don't think that there's anything fishy going on here? And I know all these things firsthand because I served on the Gaza border. And there's many people that say, oh, well, this was just a breach. No, that's not a breach. I'm sorry, that's not a breach. That's an inside job. So we're all trying to make sense of what happened on October 7th, which is Shmini Atzeret. So what I want to do is reverse engineer this thing a little bit to kind of help you understand why I believe that this was an inside job. September 1st, the Israeli government confiscated the weapons of the security teams in the Gaza Belt communities. Why that happened, nobody knows. Fast forward to September 10th. On September 10th, the Moatzah, which is basically the municipalities of the Gaza Belt communities, received reports of increased tensions on the border of Gaza during the Jewish holidays. Those same heads of municipalities asked the army if they should cancel their festivities in light of the warnings of increased tensions on the border of Gaza. And what did the army say? They said, no, don't cancel anything. It appears as though we're heading into a state of calm. Now, you can assume that the Shabak did not know about this attack, but that's highly improbable. I mean, Israel is probably the most advanced surveillance state in the world, and the Gaza border is probably the most heavily surveilled. The fence was breached in 15 different locations, and you want to tell me that the most highly advanced surveillance equipment on arguably any border in the world didn't pick that up, didn't report it? Well, they did, and it's documented. So don't believe that lie. Now, once thousands of Gazans on pickup trucks and hang gliders invaded Israel, which apparently nobody knew about, right? Okay, you believe that? Which apparently no one knew about. They had 7 hours to kill everyone in their path, completely destroy kibbutzim. Not only that, take hostages back to Gaza, unscathed, unopposed. Do you know how long it takes an attack helicopter to get activated and blow up any one of those tractors or pickup trucks or hang gliders that invaded Israel? Less than 5 minutes. And I know all these things firsthand because I served on the Gaza border. Less than 5 minutes. It all could have been over. It could have been a 5 minute, it could have been a matter of 5 minutes before the whole thing was upended. And instead they had 7 hours, possibly 8, to conquer kibbutzim, kill thousands, and bring back hostages alive, unopposed. And there's many people that say, oh, well, this was just a breach. No, that's not a breach. I'm sorry, that's not a breach. That's an inside job. Like I said, this is not a video I wanted to do. This is not something, and oh, by the way, now America is coming with aid. Do you really think Israel needs American aid to fight Gaza? Gaza. Their most elite force, their air force is hang gliders, and their ground troops are pickup trucks. They don't even have a tank. And we need American aid Israel needs American aid to fight them? Are you f***ing serious? You don't think that there's anything fishy going on here?